Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Rutherford County Schools work session tonight. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Board Member Wayne Blair. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Or if you take a look at the agenda, please. Number 4 is approval of agenda. I need a motion to. No, I don't need a motion. I'm sorry. Do you want anything moved? If nothing, number 5, consent agenda. You want anything moved there? If not, we'll go to number 6, visitors. That'll be for Thursday night, of course. Which brings us to number 7, Mr. Director.
And number 7 is some job descriptions, and these came from Mr. Tackett and Dr. Anthony and Mr. Spurlock both reviewed them. These are new positions, and so when we get new positions, we bring job descriptions to you. Remember that one is the athletic trainer coordinator and then a certified athletic trainer. Recommend approval. The motion is to approve the new positions for athletic trainer coordinator and certified athletic trainer. This is, of course, because if you remember MTSU backing off where they shared the graduate students, and also we're having to make some changes in how covering our football games and all that have trainers on the field with us. So that's part of that transitioning change.
Question from anyone? Number 8.
Number 8 is facilities. Blackman High School baseball restroom, laundry, and concession stand. Dr. Lisa Justice, principal of Blackman High School, has submitted a request to add restrooms and laundry room to the existing baseball building. The addition will be approximately 12 feet 8 inches by 28 feet. She has also requested permission to rearrange the seating in the baseball field and add a small 10 by 8 and a 10 by 8 concession stand. The project will be fully funded by gifts and funds raised by parents and the team. Dr. Justice submitted the appropriate paperwork. Everything appears to be in order, and the engineering has checked the site. There are no conflicts. Blackman High will purchase the appropriate permits and meet all state and local codes at no cost to the board. The estimated cost is $29,850. Recommend approval of a motion to construction of a baseball building addition. Concession stand is presented at no cost to the board. We got another question or two we're going to ask that kind of arose today, and we'll follow up on that before Thursday, but likely it'll be in this concept.
Board, are there questions? Part B.
B is the automated control systems for 15 schools. The Energy Efficient Schools Initiative has approved a loan in the amount of $1,282,842 to install automated energy management systems in the balance of the Rutherford County schools for maximizing energy efficiency. These buildings include Rockville Elementary School, Central Magnet School, Siegel High School, Holloway High School, Christiana Elementary School, Christiana Middle School, Central Office Building, Maintenance and Adult Engineering Building, Cedar Grove Elementary School, Smyrna Elementary School, Roy Waldron School, Oakland High School, Riverdale High School, and Smyrna High School, and Laverne High School. The loan has a 1% interest rate and a term of 3 years. The simple average payback from savings is 3.33 years, which means that we will be putting money back into the budget in 3.33 years. The application approval and contract is attached under a tab for board review. This application must be approved and forwarded to the County Commission for approval. We recommend approval. The motion is to approve a loan in the amount of $1,282,842 at 1% interest in a term of 3 years from the Energy Efficient Schools Initiative for automated energy management systems. The work will commence once the agreement has been made it through the full county commission and signed by the county mayor. We're not going to take this tomorrow night to budget and finance and all, but we get your approval if you want to do this concept. We've done this before, you know, with the the lighting, when we changed out our fluorescent light with energy management funds, when we did some of the plumbing things. Also, some of the first round of our energy control systems. We've discussed with you LED lighting, you know, in the future to do. So this is recommendation basically coming from Mr. Clardy and them that he was offered this opportunity from this committee, since Rutherford County has been one of the leaders in this, to give us another opportunity to finish out these energy management controls. But at some time, because the county commission doesn't meet typically in July, you know, it's probably not going to get all of its approvals and things done until August, September, or something like that. But this would be our first step in sending it forward.
Questions?
Mr. Sandvig is pretty well aware of this too. He's been involved in the talk of this. And might say to our listeners, we've been 3 years now and not really increased our utility bills in Rutherford County Schools because of things we do and things like this to try to say we've added more square footage but not had to go up on our utility bills because of our energy management factors that we're putting in place.
Board? Part C.
C is right-of-way, an easement, and electric meter agreement for Atmos Energy Corporation. Mr. Ronnie Sutton of Atmos Energy Corporation forwarded 2 agreements for Rutherford County property at Walter Hill. One is a 30-foot diameter right-of-way easement agreement for the length of 10 years at the intersection of Highway 231 and Jefferson Pike, where we currently have a pole light and flashing school sign. Atmos wants to install an antenna at the top of a new pole at the same location for their digital metering and etc. They want to replace the pole, reinstall a new parking light, and put the flashing school light back up on the pole and change the meter over to their name and pay the electric bill for the parking light, the flashing school light, and the antenna for the length of the terms of the agreement. The electric meter agreement gives them permission to put the current service under their name and will repair and maintain the pole and antenna. Engineering has reviewed the site and location and finds no conflicts or issues with the agreements. And Mr. Reed, our school board attorney, has also reviewed the agreements. Recommend approval. The motion is to approve the right-of-way easement agreement and electric meter agreement for Atmos Energy Corporation as presented.
Board? Number 9.
Number 9 is transportation. Pursuant to policy 3.405, bus contract award procedures, the potential contractor lists for the 2018-19 school year are presented. These 2 lists, a first priority list is regular bus drivers. The second priority list is those contractors who currently own 1 or more contracts. They are for approval for the facilitate the awarding of new bus contracts on a timely basis for the beginning of the new school year and thereafter as contracts are turned into the Transportation Department throughout the year. Recommend approval. The motion is to approve the potential first and second priority list for the 2018-2019 school year as presented.
Board, questions for the director? Mr. Young.
Do you want this to impact this motion, or is it something we need to do more of in the future? We've got our 2 attorneys here if you want to, whatever you want to do.
Using out there from the bus drivers that they don't understand. So in the future, we need to look at this policy and see if there's some way we can clear this up.
The language in the contract, it might amend the contract for better understanding and whatnot. Either of you want to add anything?
I think I've spoken with Mr. Young and a couple of other board members related to this policy, and we've talked about adding language specifically to think it was line 38, that just specifies that the bus drivers have to be considered full-time bus drivers for 2 years, and that's something that we can add at the next policy meeting without any issue. I don't foresee any issues with that.
Okay. We'll look at this next policy. Sure. Board, any further questions on that? Number 10, you have a packet that we got just before the meeting from Mr. Evans on a zone exemption appeal, and be sure that you have read that by Thursday night. And we may have to have some action on that on Thursday night, which brings us to 11, I believe.
Number 11. Let me propose kind of something as a director for you to think about, which is probably a little off our parliamentary procedure, but take a look at. We did look at some properties. Of course, what has put us into looking for properties earlier this year, before we were actually trying to build a school on them, is there was a favorable period for the county in their borrowing, and that they had anticipated having to borrowing a larger amount than they're actually going to have to borrow in their August borrowing cycle. Those cycles last particularly 1 year to 18 months, typically when they borrow. So, in order, since the commission doesn't meet at all in July, in mid-August they do the borrowing, we're really running out of time to go through health and ed, budget finance, full commission, of course board approval first to go there. So it might be possible to, we have an estimated amount, somewhere in the neighborhood of $11 million, to buy at least 3 pieces of property in 3 different sections of the county, which, you know, I think as we've looked at it, maybe for a dozen years or something, that we would not have to go back to the commission to purchase more property for future school sites. We're looking at cases where we can do elementary, middle, and high, or some other combination of those. And of course, what you choose determines what's borrowing for the city and all that's involved. We really haven't had a good opportunity to negotiate prices and all with this. So it would be advantageous to us and possibly to the county as a whole if we could get them to put a sum of money in their borrowing cycle for future schools, school properties, and then give us a little bit more flexibility in the negotiation part for the price. And you got contingency that is based upon floodplains. We saw new maps today on floodplains and that sort of thing, what might work, what would not work. I'm just trying to figure some way in this cycle that we're in, compacted so much, to build into it the ability to look at it a little bit in more detail, and still meet their condition of time frames and that. Of course, I guess 4 Health and Ed did travel with us as we looked at some of these properties and all too. So I kind of pitch it back to you as a board. If we could, I don't want to miss this cycle, but is it an opportunity to give us a little more flexibility to look at these properties in more detail? They understand our concept. They understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to buy property now at prices that's probably going to be less than they are 8 years from now or 10 years from now. We want to go through with this, but is there another way to look at it? That's what I'm kind of pitching back to the board. Before we go through, there are motions here tonight, but if you did something like that, it might replace all of those individual motions.
So
It's up to the board.
the motions that are listed here in the agenda, are they the staff recommendations, or is the staff recommendation what you've just shared with us?
We put this together this morning as we looked at more maps and that sort of thing. And if you ask us right now, yes, we could go with that, but is there a better option? I think we think so. If we could get a little bit more time and flexibility to look at this.
What kind of better options would we see?
How many acres, how many total acres do you need? Based upon some of the floodplain areas where you can kind of sit the buildings on that, could you get by with less acreage? Or you're really gonna need more acreage if this is a piece of property? Is there some negotiation in the price? You know, based on that? If we can, if the commission will give us, would borrow the money and dedicate it to future schools, again, the things that I want to stress to them, and will stress to them if this is what we do tomorrow night, is we have to come back to you for each one of these properties individually. I mean, they have the trump card, there's no questions asked. But if you miss the borrowing cycle, then everything begins to change in the dynamic. When again, if they don't borrow for a year to 18 months, and if the terms are more favorable now in rates and things, is one reason they actually led us to look at this. Can we make the very best decision for Rutherford County Schools and the citizens of Rutherford County with a little bit more flexibility if we can get a dollar figure in?
So, make sure I'm understanding what you're suggesting. And I noticed too on the motions and what we do have on here that I believe there was a piece of property that we looked at on Saturday that's not even listed on here anymore. Is that right? Jefferson Pike?
Yes, that one's off now.
Okay, so it's off the table. So,
That one's off the table, the second one.
so
That was a change.
is what you're suggesting then is that we go to them with a request for a certain dollar amount for future land purchases,
That's a thought that I'm,
but not necessarily at this point specific sites?
right. But I want to assure them, and I think that we're looking for those three main corridors again. Southeast, northwest, and basically kind of north. Not saying change that or anything from what your health and ed people saw, but is there a way we can evaluate better the total number of acres needed and the dollars not to exceed a figure?
What I find attractive is the opportunity for negotiation and some time because all three of these properties would require step systems
All three will require steps.
to make sure that we have enough soil that they would actually work in those locations. That would
You
give us,
might buy more acreage than you need if you can look at unit floodplains and stuff like that.
it would give us some
Okay.
testing time.
If we did that, deferred the decision as far as the actual sites themselves, but asked for funding approval, again, if I'm understanding that correctly. Any of these properties, because I know, again, like the one out off of 96 that we looked at before, you know, we'd already pretty well identified was really almost kind of ideal for a three-school site. I guess my question would be, do we run the risk of losing any of these properties if we wait too long?
Well, I think if you wait too long. So when I say this, I'm not saying wait even 90 days maybe, but maybe during the month of July, when the commission's not meeting, we're doing that, our engineering people and others can begin to look at this in more detail. Maybe we've got a staff attorney that could help us negotiate prices too. We could have some exchange, kind of knowing where we need to go to try to best utilize the monies the commission allows us to have. The time frame is not to our advantage by naming everything right now when we're a little bit early on this. It's unfortunate it occurred this way, but I think the timing is right to do the borrowing. The actual selection and the amount of acreage may not be the best at this point.
Which in really all the county commission is supposed to do is just approve the funding anyway. The site selection is up to the board.
But they like to kind of know where in areas at least.
Well,
But we're not saying go out and look necessarily for totally new places.
Well, they should know. I mean,
they
the
went.
four of them went with us. I mean, and we were extremely open and transparent with them. And I think this also eventually will reflect a considerable savings for the taxpayer. But, you know, you can't know that for sure, but I believe that I believe this method will.
I think we'd want to come back within 60 to 90 days and be more definitive if that's what they need to do. Once they approve the money, then you got to go back and do the contract for the actual property, which comes back to them.
The contract has to go through the county commission?
Does it or not? Okay. They don't have to approve the individual borrowed amounts for each property?
Just the total.
Contract doesn't have to go through. They
Okay,
have to
board has to
approve
approve that.
a budget, a land budget. for each
Right,
property.
so if they do that, in a process that starts tomorrow night, then their authorization is concluded.
And I would be very surprised if they went that route. I think, as Mr. Odom was saying, more practical to think in terms of getting, okay, we are looking at, say, 10 million, a package that would be in the $10 million range, more to put a kind of a placeholder in the borrowing at this point. But the specific budgets would have to be approved. Like, for an example, when we did the Rocky Fork, we had a budget approved for, have a name yet, but what, a site for a middle school and a future elementary school in the Smyrna area. Them appropriating that money is our authorization, and it's contingent to on testing coming out and all of that. But once we have that approval and we meet the testing requirements, then we can move forward.
Right, but we don't do testing until after contract.
When you make a contract purchase.
But it has the contingencies.
Correct.
We have additional floodplain maps and things that we're looking at too, that come through this today too, which may even change a little bit acreage or actual sites.
Property, my knowledge, is yet to get less expensive as years go by, so I think the opportunity presents itself now, and certainly should take advantage of it.
Potential is not to spend more money, but to save some.
Yes,
I mean, that's the whole thought process.
So we looked at 5 sites, and you're saying that site number 2, Jefferson Pike, is no longer available? Okay. Are we possibly going to find that next week, site number 1 or site number 3, 4, or 5 may also not be available? You know, and I only bring that up because it seems
That could happen regardless of what we did tonight.
that's exactly right. And if these are sites that we've looked at, investigated, I wonder if it wouldn't be appropriate for us to move forward, but I'm listening.
The proposal I see here as far as the amount of acres is different from what was being discussed on Saturday.
You had an 85 and this is a 94.
And we looked at some, it's supposed to be around 100 that we was gonna need, and there's 120 acres here. And, do we need 100 acres, or do we need 120? Or do we need 85, or do we need 94? I don't know.
Well, what's the presentation for why do we have a recommendation of 94 acres then?
Mr. Carty and them put something together this morning before he had to leave, that if we're gonna have to select tonight, then this would be his recommendation at this particular point. He doesn't select for you on the southeast, though. He doesn't make a selection.
my desire would be for Mr. Reed to come up with a motion that we could send to Health Ed for an amount with the opportunity to to test and negotiate.
But aren't, any contracts contingent though on the testing passing? So is that really an issue with selecting the property now?
We don't have any money to pay for it, so,
Right, so we are looking at passing a recommendation that would request the money.
yeah, we don't have the money to even pay for the testing.
Right,
in the
right.
budget.
Total amount to be borrowed changed too, because Mr. Sandvig, today, as we looked at some of those figures, and you may have a sheet at your desk, because we had to do the city share, too, so the $2 million figure really goes to 11. So, again, you got acreage, you got other things there, which we can't do anything about, it's going to be elementary school there. Certainly by law, we have to do that. But, again, in kind of to trying to get it through, may need looking at a little bit more. Is there a way?
Do we feel like the commission will be favorable to doing it that way versus us coming to them with the actual site recommendations that have been voted on by the board?
I think they always, I think they pretty much always like to know as specific as you can. I don't know whether your motion needs to say up to $11 million from the sites listed or something. I don't mind trying to confine it some way for them. I just would like to see them to give us a little bit of flexibility, or us to make a recommendation to them that gives us some flexibility in some negotiations about total acreage and total dollars.
The 11 million basically would be a ceiling. Anything less than that would be a savings.
Don't we feel pretty confident that Highway 96 and 840 not only is an acceptable site, but is a critical need?
Well, it's a critical need. I mean, yeah, there's no question. It's going to be, how many, Mr. Lee, how many houses, you serve on Smyrna Planning, how many lots are kind of approved and then where are they in that process?
Between Stewart's Creek and here, between 3,000 and 5,000.
And you said something about they're in some of the latter stages of getting this going or whatever? I don't think there's a question about the need.
Well, perhaps we should separate this and talk about the Highway 96 and 840. We wouldn't take anything other than the entire site, and we don't have any options for more or less land. I mean, we will take the entire 100 and however many acres at that site.
I think
113.
we're still looking at the term negotiation. I think the reason for the 11 million is to give us an opportunity to say, okay, we've got the money.
Show us your best price.
Why haven't we used that method in the past?
We have, but we didn't come up, but we had more time.
Oh, okay.
I mean, your issue to me is the time. I mean, if to borrow instead of September, October, which very often it is, the most favorable rates for them, they felt would be August, so they have set a borrowing date of mid-August, and that's what caught us by surprise.
I would just hate to send a recommendation to Health and Ed Budget and the County Commission that was ambiguous and undermined the possibility of their approval when we absolutely certainly do have critical needs here. I'll keep thinking on it.
They certainly have to be aware of our critical needs because we have no inventory, to my knowledge, other than the Whitworth Buchanan location for a new high school
Right.
years down the road, but we have just about remodeled, renovated, and added on to just about every structure we have online, so it should definitely be obvious to them that we're in a critical need for any future campuses.
Mr. Reed, any thoughts, sir?
One thing I will note is the economy's changed since we built our recent schools in the last 10 years, because we're in a rising interest rate environment now, which we've not been in before, and that's one of the things kind of driving what you've heard from budget is the fact that it will be better to the extent they can include in funding now this next, when they go to the bond market next, go ahead and get something in there for funding for these schools, because it's probably going to be borrowed at a lower interest rate now than it would be sometime in the future. We've not been in a rising interest rate environment for probably 10 years or more. So the Fed has already signaled they expect to raise rates 2 more times this year, so we'll probably have a half point higher interest rate at the end of this calendar year than we do today. So to some extent, what the budget folks are telling you in this is all driven largely because the interest rate environment has changed from what we've had previously. Now, and if I understand what you guys are talking about doing is maybe appropriating maybe $11 million that could be used between these properties, or if you find another site, another property that for future school sites, but we want to go ahead and get $11 million in the budget to get appropriated for use for the next time we go to the bond market, so we'll have $11 million available this next go-around for future school sites, rather than delaying and having to do our due diligence, picking out sites and soil testing and all that stuff, and coming back 3 months from now or 6 months from now. Because if we wait that 3-month period or 6-month period, we're going to have higher interest rates that we're facing at that point.
They won't borrow again. That's the other issue.
That is the other, yeah, correct.
At least 18 months.
Correct.
12 to 18 months. And
rates may be a full point higher than the way things look like they're going right now. So, so I think if the board, and it's up to you what you want to do, and as to how much flexibility you want to leave with respect to these properties, but you could request the county commission to go ahead and approve appropriating $11 million for future school sites, subject to the school board being able to negotiate acceptable prices and terms, the sites testing out okay, and the county commission ultimately approving those school sites if you wanted to. Because really what we're talking about doing now is just requesting an appropriation of $11 million for future school sites. And we're not saying we think it's going to be among these 3 or 4 we've got here, but we're not really locking ourselves into that until we get a chance to do the soil studies, topo studies, surveys, get some geotech work done and things like that you'd want to get done with respect to the properties. All these are going to be step system sites. So with these being step system sites, they're dependent on soil conditions. So whether a step system site would have to be 12 acres or 18 acres is very dependent on a soil scientist getting out there and testing those soils and knowing how they test out, because that's very variable from site to site. And we just don't, and that normally we would have that information already by now before we bring these properties to the board, but we don't have that. We've not had time to do that because we're trying to make this next bond cycle if we can.
I don't know if that's, and I don't want to question, but according to the motions that have been presented to us, and these are very typical motions for land purchases, we typically don't have soil testing and environmental information before contract. And so all of that is what the contract contingencies are for. Is that going to be different somehow this time, that we're going to be able to do soil testing before ever entering into a contract?
I would think you would go ahead and order. Well, right now you don't even have a good, we're early naming the amount of acres we want to buy. Normally we would be farther along with respect to having some general idea of the amount of acreage that we want to purchase at this point. But you're right, the contract, when contract's signed with the landowner, there will be a contingency in there saying that the obligation to purchase the property is going to be contingent upon the soils testing out acceptable to the Board of Education, your geotech studies, your survey studies, title studies, all that typical stuff. So that will be part of the contract, and that will come back to you. I guess what I hear what Mr. Odom's saying is he thinks the board may have more flexibility with respect to negotiating with the landowners here between all these properties if we simply appropriate $11 million for the purchase of potential sites, not locking us into a certain amount of acreage, a certain price, and certain terms at this point here tonight, and coming back and maybe negotiating with the landowners and seeing if we can reach an acceptable deal when we have more information, and bringing that back to the board here in the next month or two when we have that information concluded. So that's the difference. So you're looking at, you've got, if you take your approach that you're talking about doing is a very specific approach, going ahead and just saying, okay, we'll approve these sites, this is the funding that we want to allocate now, that's fine if the board wants to go that direction. If you do that, you're probably going to be locked into the pricing and the acreage that you've got here tonight, which may be more acres than what you need. It may be a higher price than you need to pay. But that's certainly an option for the board should you want to consider it and go that way. With what Mr. Odom is proposing as an alternative with respect to appropriating simply $11 million in appropriation for future school sites, with it, all these sites are going to be reviewed and coming back to the board in the next 30 to 60 days for your review and study when we have more information about flood mapping, soil conditions, and things like that. Soil maps are things that you look at. A lot of that stuff is on county public available sites that you don't have to go actually do testing on the ground. So, and we can get some of that information collected just from what's publicly available without having to go on the property to actually test the soils.
I would think something else that I would even be willing to put in it if it would work. If you're worried about them not being specific, if we could, typically they could approve the total amount and don't have to approve that, but if we put in the motion and they approve the motion that they have to approve each site, then we would lock us into that.
But it also locks us into an additional review from the county commission that we're not currently subjected to.
Absolutely. But your concern was, I mean, if you vote them on these one at a time, that's what they're going to do, because we'd have 3 separate motions. So they would be choosing.
Something I'd like to point out, Mr. Reed, something going back to something that you said, and I just want to make sure everybody's aware, the county commission is not allowed to approve the site. They're not supposed to have a say-so in it. I'll take you back to a lawsuit that took place about 20 years ago, where they are only able to approve the funding.
Correct.
Okay. But I still keep going back to, especially like when you're looking at this 96 Almaville Road, I mean, 6 months ago, we were talking about how, we know this 3-school complex is going to be a must. And 6 months, we haven't found any other property. We've talked about this being such an ideal piece of property, but here we are just, again, I'm sorry, kind of kicking the can down the road again on making a decision on it. And if I understand correctly, we've already lost that one piece that we looked at on Saturday. I don't know the exact reasons, but I keep asking myself that, if we haven't come up with anything else and contracts are still contingent on the soil testing and all of those kind of things, do we really want to keep procrastinating on pieces of property that we know will work for what we're looking for if those other things pan out?
I would think that the county commission, when they look at the money and the Fed, and I can see some reasons to look favorably on this idea, and it does give us time for Mr. Clardy, Mr. Lee, and perhaps others, the director, to use the month of July before the borrowing date to negotiate with possible property owners of various sites. I think this, to ask for the $11 million, as open as we have been with them, I think that's probably a pretty good idea, but it's going to take a motion from somebody to.
I'd like to share some discussion we had in our van about maybe purchasing additional land, not just 100 acres, but maybe 200 acres. And if we did that, then that might give us some room later on to come back and recapture some of this money we're spending on land. So, but how do we know we can purchase more land? We haven't even had an opportunity to talk to them about it.
Well, the county commission, first of all, is generally aware if they want to be aware. If they wanted to check, all they had to do was ask what the general sites are that we have looked at in the past and Saturday as well. We haven't kept anything from them at all. I'm just not sure if there's a major problem here. I'm not sure that I understand what it is. I kind of like the idea that we're not roped into a certain piece of property at a certain price tonight when we don't know, when we may well be able to do better than that. I don't know.
Mr. Odom, you feel like that? I think we've heard that amount, 10, 5, and 11 possibly, as something that they would look favorable.
Well, they certainly didn't turn thumbs down on it. And we've shared that anywhere from the mayor all the way up, with some of the committee members and all, that they would consider that.
They know that, as Mr. Blair said a minute ago, that our inventory of property is about as close to zero as it can get. And you're right. They own a piece of property that we own, that the taxpayers of Rutherford County own right now, that is going to be a future school, and is not already committed to one, as Rocky Fork is at Whitworth Buchanan Middle School, for a future high school at some point. So it just follows that eventually, and I think eventually is now, we're going to have to request some land, money for land. I think they are very much aware of that. And it appears that if there's a chance for a better price, it's now. Maybe I'm not seeing the problem clearly.
Well, I'll go back to what I said before. I like the thought of us having an opportunity to negotiate and save the taxpayers some dollars. So if Mr. Reed had a motion that he could formulate utilizing the 11 million as a ceiling, I would certainly vote for that motion.
I also love the idea of saving the taxpayers' dollars. I don't know how we accomplish that in a public forum. When we have to be so transparent, it is always incredibly difficult for a public entity to negotiate for land when we have to we have to have approval. We have to have approval of how much can we spend before we can enter into a contract. And so, which comes first? I've got 11 million to spend. How much is your land? Well, it's 11 million. Well, how about 10.5? No, you've got 11 million to spend, and I know you've got that, so I want 11 million. The problems that I see with this, and I'm not convinced that it's wrong, but the problems that I see, we've never done it like this before, this type of approval process. We're in essence creating a second level of approval that is essentially for the site location with the county commission. And then we've got an $11 million bucket, and whoever negotiates first can get the most of the 11 million that they might want. And then the second negotiation gets leftovers, and the third negotiation gets the last of it. And along the way, we could lose the opportunity for any of these sites by not going ahead and taking decisive action at this time. I'm just pointing out arguments that I'm considering.
And my argument would be if you're going to charge more than what we're kind of looking at now, deal's off.
Okay.
I mean, that's just my thought.
Yeah, I mean, we've
We're
already
not
locked in
down
the ceiling
to
here.
Right.
And your point would be well taken, I think, if there was only one entity out there, or one location, but we have multiple locations that we're going to be negotiating. And I don't know if that doesn't put us in possibly the best bargaining position than we've been in a long time.
I think everything Mr. Holliday just said is exactly right, but it's always been that way. We've been fighting this. I know Mr. Gill fought it all the time, because as soon as the school board shows up on somebody's property, you know what happens.
Yeah.
That's been going on for years, and this is going to be the same thing 50 years from now. Mr. Sandy, what do you got?
Just one of the things that I think Mr. Odom alluded to, as we examine the sites more, we may see a possibility, can we trim this acreage somewhat and accomplish what we need? But the other thing is, when we're talking about the commission appropriating, we just need to use, say, the 10.3 million. Is that is what they will be budgeting for schools. The other is an adjustment to the borrowing.
It doesn't need to include the city
Need to-
portion.
At least we'll make that adjustment. Yeah, I just wanted to give you all an idea of where.
It's possible that somebody's sitting out there and thinking, and I get it. Well, there's a lot of places in the county, blah blah blah. Why have you only got so few? Well, the truth is, we had a whole list of them. I think Mr. Clardy had the list the other day. I did not look at the list, but I believe it came to us on our website, on our internet. I believe I have a copy of it at home, and he pointed out to us, y'all recall, that a lot of them were totally inappropriate. They were in the wrong place, but many of them were way too small. Some of them were in floodplains. I mean, these are what our staff said were the best available at this time. And it's not that we haven't. Gosh, we've advertised, and I know we have talked to realtors about helping us find possible property, that sort of thing. And we're talking about the result.
I like Mr. Blair's recommendation, and I would second that recommendation if Mr. Reed could come up with a motion for us.
I could draft a motion and bring it back to the board tomorrow night, but I guess what we're talking about doing is a motion to appropriate 10.3 million.
I'm gonna have it for tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Health and Ed.
Okay.
Like I say, the time frame is the killer here for everything we're doing.
Do we, because of this situation, are we able to vote tonight?
We did we had it, the property meeting tonight was advertised. That's the only thing you can really do, I think, on the budget you can vote on tonight, on the agenda.
One other thing I would like to point out, and Mr. Blair, actually something you just said a while ago about having multiple sites to pick from. Now, my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that we basically have 3 areas of the county that we're looking at that we know sometime in the next 10 years we're going to need 2 or 3 more schools. But the only areas out of the ones that we've looked at and that we've been looking for, the one in Christiana is the only one with multiple properties that we have to pick from. The other 2, we just have the one.
Well, I'm just saying, we have multiple properties available here.
Right, but only for one of those areas of the county, though. There's only one available for 2 of the sites. And again, we've solicited public input, we've advertised, we've networked with realtors, so again, I would hate to see us lose the opportunity, and I think, back to Mr. Holliday's point, the negotiating, usually by the time you make it public, you're looking, and of course, the negotiations can still be contingent on the property owners meeting the conditions of the soil testing and all the other things that have to be done. So there is still certainly room for negotiation, I think, as you move forward.
If we agreed that the Highway 96 840 is the number 1 priority, what is the number 2 priority in location?
When the school would have to be added,
Yes, sir.
probably you're looking at the south side because of the size of Christiana and Rockvale and all on that in the middle school. Of course, one of your issues out on the north of 96 and all out there is that Shelton development with 750 homes that Parks is doing. That's a very large one. And as Mr. Lee has said, some 3,000 lots down toward that Smyrna area. But, you know, and even though this is you are rezoning for the high school this fall. So that may, even though that may be a high growth area, it might buy you a little time before you have to build that high school. You know, we got Rockvale opening, you know, this year, so the high school might not be, but we're just saying we need to do the 3 properties. So as this develops, we have that option. You know, I don't know if we're thinking we had to identify 2 of them and not the other, or whatever, until we get more on the other, whatever you want to do.
Well, Mr. Reed has the opportunity to put together a motion at this point. I would like to move.
Well, if the board's inclined to do it, if you want to go with what Mr. Odom is proposing to do, then I think what your motion would be to request the county commission to approve appropriating $10.3 million in funding for the acquisition of multiple future school sites, which will be available upon the Board of Education negotiating acceptable terms, prices, and the soil sites, well, the testing of the properties coming out acceptable to the Board of Education.
That would be my motion.
Is that 10.3 or is it 11 million?
Well, Mr. Sandberg, I thought he said 10.3.
They have to add the other
They'll add it to the
handle
bar.
differently.
11.
But that's an adjustment Lisa will make to the borrowing package. It's not a piece they would appropriate for us as part of our school building.
We're all right with 10.3?
I'll second that.
Mr. Reed, does your motion require a second action from the county commission to approve the sites?
The motion I just made is not.
Okay.
Board? Okay, it's been, motion's been made and properly seconded. Last call. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Ms. Moore is opposed. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Insurance update. Dr. Anthony, good evening.
Yes, hey, how are you doing? I sent an email out today about 2 telehealth services that Cigna's added that can be taken care of by phone or video chat, so please look at those attachments. They are with a board-certified doctor and for minor conditions. Our meeting for June has just been canceled, so Mr. Sandberg and I will resume our meetings in August.
Questions for Dr. Anthony? Thank you. Director's update.
Ms. Moore had asked me a while back to do a report, which is this one, your employee exit survey, and you can read, but I'll point out a few things to you on this. You should have a copy of that, Ms. Moore. So I wanted to kind of wait till we ended the year and we had the changes. So we kind of started the first of the year. So we've had, this represents 386 people that are exiting Rutherford County Schools, with 64.8, about 65% of them being certified people, and about 35% being classified, which is very close to the percentage we have of employees, over 3,000 certified and around 2,000 of the classified. So why are they leaving? Influenced decision to leave. I think interesting there, the better opportunity was 28.1%, and the other family circumstances in moving, you know, that's another 28.8%. So it's either family change or they got something they felt's a better job. My argument is, I was telling Mr. Spurlock here, is you have to have competitive salaries. So if they think they got a better opportunity, we have to, and you as a board do that, we have to pay attention to the salaries and what our offerings are. That's a factor. How long have they been employed? And you see there that really less than 6 years, from 0 through 5 years, is 60.6% of your people. So your turnover is highly in those younger years. And we're seeing that. Sometimes with the millennial generation and things, we're actually seeing much more turnover in that area. We don't lose them a lot after the 10 years, you know, from 11 through 20, I mean, is much less than some of the others. So interesting, that's just something for your information. Well, what do they think about the salaries, what that is? And so what I did here, we have extremely satisfied, somewhat satisfied, neutral, somewhat dissatisfied, extremely dissatisfied. So in these next items, I'm going to kind of take out people that were dissatisfied at all. Either it wasn't a factor to them or they're very satisfied. I thought it's really same with our salary structure. 91.7% or 92% of our employees were not disappointed with the salary structure at this time. And we provided an additional 2%, classified, certified, you know, for the coming year. So that's a good factor. How about supervisor? Now, these people exiting includes people that have been dismissed, people who have retired for leaving for a whole host of reasons, but basically 87% were neutral to only 6.2% neutral. The rest of them were extremely or somewhat satisfied with their supervisor. So that's a good figure. I think anybody in the employment agency would think that's a pretty good number when you look at the percent. Work schedules, 93.3%. We're either neutral to satisfied with that. The working conditions, 84.7%. Again, we're neutral or satisfied. How about the cooperation, since we are kind of a PLC collaborative environment in our district, which we tried to spread across all of our schools and up here in the central office, was 90.4%, 9 out of 10 was satisfied with that collaborative, cooperative environment in our school district. That's a real compliment to our people, that they're seeing that. How about professional development? One of the best things we do in Rutherford County Schools, and Mr. Spurlock and I have been saying that to the new teachers as they come in for their pre-service time with Dr. Anthony. One of the things we've been saying, you have tremendous opportunities to grow yourself in Rutherford County Schools by taking advantage of the professional development. Mr. Zago reminded me, we've been doing this with classified too, our special ed, Title I EAs. We're bringing them in for professional development. So this includes both our classified and our certified people. 93% of the people noted how well we do professional development. It's a real compliment to the system and the people doing it. How about health benefits? 95.1% recognize the health benefits. And I always say to the county commission, you may not realize how strong the insurance program you provide to your employees is as a draw and keeping them here, and that figure right there is a pretty strong number. You take a look at 95% in the health. Central office support, I asked that for myself. How's our people up here doing in serving our employees? Everybody from maintenance to instruction to whatever department you're in up here, and that's 94.8. So you got another 95% of the people have in some way had contact with central office or felt that the central office supported them. That's really good, again, to have 95% to say that. And going to another school system, we kind of checked that out. 29% is going to another school system, another 16% said they may. It's still less than half are leaving us and going to another school system. But maybe the figure that I like best is the very last one there, Ms. Moore, is would you consider Rutherford County Schools again? The yes and the maybe is 89.1%, or about 90% of the people leaving us say they would certainly consider working for us again. Of course, some are retiring and that sort of thing that's involved, but there'd be a whole lot of places and employers that like to see that with 90% of their people that would be willing to come back if that was their option. So I feel pretty good about that. I think it's accurate. I mean, they can choose to do this or not do this. And
I like that we're doing this thing.
How many employees retired this year?
We had about 100, about 60 that attended the retirement banquet.
that would be classified and certified. So it'd be about 100 at 386. Did all of them fill it out? I'm not sure. But
About 100, we say?
yeah,
Okay,
that would be classified and certified together.
okay. About 50% participation in this, so that's okay.
No, I think it's more than that.
Well, only 54 of them said that they were retiring.
Some of them I tell you what we hear a whole lot of is because of family conditions and other things too. But they're retiring 54 out of the, I see what you're saying, but I'm not sure. I think the participation level was higher in these, from the retirees in 54.
Okay.
I didn't fill one out.
You didn't fill one out?
I didn't fill one out.
Okay.
Because I thought, I mean, I would have been very positive on it because I'm a director.
It would have been all right.
Now, that part about returning.
You had every right to fill it out.
I absolutely did. They asked me, why didn't you? And I said, well, I'd be awful biased.
Dr. Anthony, will you please get one of these surveys to Mr. Odom and Mr. Snell? All right.
So some of those that didn't fill out, maybe some of us up here. I don't know.
Did Mr. Snell fill one out? No? Mike Snell. He did not, did he? Okay. That was your choice.
I have a question, and Dr. Anthony can answer this. When we do these surveys, is there anywhere at all on the survey form for them to offer comments?
Yes.
Remarks?
Yes.
Okay.
Some do, most do something. Somewhere in the last year, I gave you some of the positives. Sometimes we get some specific recommendations, sometimes for a school, sometimes for the district. But very often, even though it's really high, is when we took away spousals on the insurance, that came out on several of them. Sorry that happened, you know, so we're seeing things like that. Have you read them? Some too, that's what I.
Yes, and I was going to comment on the first question on other. The most answer that they listed was illness, then followed by continuing their education and changing career. So they often get a little bit more details.
Anything else, Mr. Director? No, sir. 14, Ms. Moore.
I will defer any report until Thursday.
Thank you. Mr. Holliday?
I'm going to have to defer as well.
Mr. Blair, I think you have an announcement on general discussion by board members.
Well, just a reminder that it's kind of a bittersweet announcement in that we will be having a reception for Mr. Odom, celebrating his years of service to our children and our employees and the county community in general. And I know it's a tough time for all of us who have so much respect for you, Mr. Odom. So, but it'll be a chance to actually come in and share our thoughts with you and what you've meant to each of us personally and all of us as a community. So 3:30 to 5:30 here at the central office. Teacher Center. So thank you, Ms. Michael.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
We all head to the courthouse for the
Yeah. Well, we'll thank you again when we get up there.
6 o'clock tomorrow night.
Mr. Chairman, do we have additional meetings scheduled?
What about it? We don't have anything yet?
Okay. Do we anticipate that we might need to give availability dates or anything of that nature? Okay.
Our next meeting is this Thursday, 5 o'clock this time.
You have a legal conference that's coming up.
Right. Okay. Board, anybody else have general discussion items?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to relay my thanks to the board for agreeing to move the meeting back a little later this evening so I could make sure I got here safely.
Well, of course, consider that done. Anything else? I feel adjournment is right upon us. We're adjourned. Thank you.